inter-Korean talks are taking place with the South Korea-hosted Olympics just a month away. Can these talks really move beyond the sporting arena? What about for the near future? We're going to answer some of those questions when we come back. Welcome back. You're still watching World Insight with me, Tian Wei, coming to you Monday to Friday, live on CGTN. In a joint statement after the 11-hour talks, the DPRK pledged to send a large delegation to next month's PyeongChang's Winter Olympics in the South. Meanwhile, South Korea released a statement suggesting the DPRK to halt hostile acts that raise tensions on the Korean peninsula. The DPRK and South Korea have agreed to restore a military hotline starting from 8 a.m. local time on Wednesday, and the two sides have agreed to hold military talks. It remains to be seen whether athletes from the two nations can really make a joint entrance at the opening and closing ceremonies at next month's games. Athletes from both sides marched together during Sydney in the year 2000. Athens 2004 and 2006 Winter Games in Turin. The DPRK's Olympic participation marked a promising start, some say, to the first inter-Korean talks in 2 years. Take a look.
The ROK and the DPRK are back on speaking terms. Ranking government officials are meeting for talks in the joint security area of the demilitarized zone. And while tensions have overshadowed the past 2 years, this meeting got off to a cordial start.
We came to this meeting today with a serious and sincere attitude, and with the thought of giving our brethren who have high hopes for this dialogue invaluable results as a first present of the year.
Our talks resume after the North and South Korean ties have been severed for a long time. But I believe the first step is half the journey. I would like to hold this meeting with tenacity and perseverance.
The DPRK's participation at the Winter Olympics in South Korea next month is the most urgent issue. The hope is that a successful Games will lead to other projects, most notably reuniting families separated by the Korean War.
Moving forward, if the Panmunjom communication channel and military communication lines are reconnected in the eastern and western sea borders, topic discussions through direct meetings between officials from both sides will naturally occur.
South Korea and the United States have agreed not to conduct joint military exercises during the Olympics. But international sanctions imposed on Pyongyang continue to strain the Kim Jong-un regime. Despite relations between Seoul and Pyongyang seemingly on the mend, there's still no solution in sight to the DPRK's nuclear and missile programs. South Korean President Moon Jae-in says better inter-Korean relations should go simultaneously with denuclearization efforts. The hope is that the momentum from these high-level talks can carry over into other areas. What concessions each side is willing to make, though, remains to be seen. Shane Hom, CGTN, Paju, South Korea.
This is really the news of the day. For more on inter-Korea dialogue, we are joined in our Beijing studio by Rong Ying, who is the Vice President of CIIS, which stands for China Institute of International Studies. What a pleasure to have you, sir, here in Beijing. In Medford, United States, we have Sung-Yoon Lee, a Kim Koo-Korea Foundation Professor of Korean Studies at the Fletcher School at Tufts University. Welcome back, Professor, to our program. In Washington, D.C., I'm so happy to be joined also by Jenny Assistant Director of the U.S.-Korea Institute of Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. She and her colleagues have been working on the Korean Peninsula issue for years with all the latest information. Thank you so much for the three of you. This is a big day. I want to start with our two panelists coming from afar. Jenny, how about from you? What do you make of the real essence of this talk? If things didn't happen, it just didn't happen. But if when it happened, it really happens fast.
Yes, I think, It's great. I think it's a great first step. I think the Olympics are an easy win because clearly North Korea wanted to participate in the Olympics, and I don't think the barriers to that were very high from South Korea. I think it's a little too early to tell how far this goes past the Olympics, though, as there's still a lot of issues to be worked out, and I think a lot of room for caution and a little skepticism as to what happens after the Olympics.
Cautious note and a bit of skepticism coming from Ms. Tao. What about from you, Professor Lee?
It's a great day for North Korea because North Korea has everything to gain and nothing to lose by sending athletes and officials and cheerleaders and so on to South Korea. In the joint statement, the word 민족, which is from the Chinese 민주, ethnic people, is mentioned 4 times in a 3-paragraph long statement. There's another word, kyorae, which means basically the same thing. And paragraph 3 is really the crux of the statement, that the two sides will work on inter-Korean affairs by themselves, by the Koreans only, which basically means, as it has during the Cold War, exclusive of the U.S., standing up to the USSR, and during the Cold War, standing up to the PRC as well. So under this mesmerizing rubric of by Koreans themselves, we'll see discussions on family reunion meetings. We'll see discussions in the coming days on perhaps the reopening of the Kaesong Industrial Complex, where 50,000 North Korean workers were employed by South Korean companies. We'll also see discussions on the reopening of a tourism location in North Korea, Mount Kumgang, which was shut down 10 years ago in the wake of the shooting of a South Korean female tourist. So all this is good for now, but will this resolve the nuclear issue? Probably not. Okay,
Professor Lee, I want very briefly a response from you, since you said North Korea has nothing to lose and everything to gain from this specific step right now. Make me wonder, probably that's the same for South Korea as well. It has nothing to lose either. Well, it's only words on the statement.
It's good business for everyone, for the international community. The Winter Olympic Games have been underreported on. You know, it's now sexy, and sexy is not a word that naturally comes to mind when you invoke the phrase North Korea. But if Kim Jong-un unleashes the triad of sexiness, the female cheerleaders in the hundreds, of course, and also girl band, it's mentioned in the joint statement that North Korea will send not only athletes and cheerleaders, but artists, musicians, and maybe even Kim's own sister, Kim Yo-jong. It's a bit of a stretch. And Trump sends his daughter, Ivanka. Can you imagine the media frenzy and excitement that will ensue if the two women have a meeting on the sidelines?
Well, Professor Lee, I have to say you're very imaginative, and certainly you're creating the biggest gala of the world for the year. But before we do that, we see the Chinese side also had its response. The Chinese Foreign Ministry also responded to the resumption of dialogue. Of course, this is being said before the statements coming from both sides came out. And let's hear what the spokesperson had to say. Mr. Lu Ka.
We are happy to see that high-level talks between the DPRK and South Korea can take place. We have said many times, as a neighbour of the Korean Peninsula, we welcome and support all positive steps that will quickly allow an easing of tensions. We also hope that these talks can allow an improvement in the relations, push forward reconciliation and cooperation, and create a good start to ease the tense situation on the peninsula.
China was nervous about the situation. Of course, this could be a nice break from the intense situation, and yet does China understand very well the reality? Mr. Rong?
Yes, certainly. I think the reality is this is really a good news and great news.
For today? For today,
and hopefully for the days to come. As we have seen that for the past year and more, we have seen tensions rising so high, and we see nuclear testings, you have missile launches, and also, of course, UN Security Council resolutions.
That's right.
So the tension. So finally, the good news coming for the beginning of this new year, 2018, we had the news of talks, and now we have the talks.
But the thing is, it's a message about a breath of relief. But we do not know, if I could use a cautious note, what might happen after the Olympic Games, even leading up to the Olympic Games. Today, we've already seen, Mr. Rong, there are disputes from both sides about exactly what they have agreed upon. For example, whether there is real military talks from both sides that have been worked on and agreed upon. And there's also different views about what has been reached today, what has been reached earlier, for example, about the use of telephones and military talks on the west of the Korean peninsula. So you see the disagreement already there.
Oh yeah, of course, it is only natural. I mean, for situations like that,
yeah.
for problems like that, I think diplomatic negotiations, so usually would come up with...
It's part of the trick, right?
Yeah, that's the trick. The good news, as I said, is that finally the two sides are sitting together. They liked, by taking advantage of these Winter Olympic Games, to find a way to address the issues, to find a way to lower the tension and prepare to create a momentum to address issues that have been, I mean, there for so
Got your point. Ms. Tao, here's the thing. You know, we mentioned earlier in our program, the two sides, two Koreas, they marched together in previous Olympic Games, but nothing happened later. And meanwhile, you only see nuclear weapons and ICBM, other capabilities developed by the DPRK, and ever more intense situation. So many wonder what's going to happen after this. You earlier sound cautious with a reason. The question is there a possibility that leading up to the game and even after the game, this momentum of working together can still be maintained, given the DPRK's nuclear capability development schedule, given Washington's possible swaying of positions while understanding its own national benefits in this whole issue? Ms. Tao.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of reasons to be cautious, and there's a lot of potential obstacles along the way. Yes, it's a great optic and it's a great symbolic gesture to have a joint Korean showing at the Olympics, and like I said, it's the easy win and it's the easy topic. But there are certainly a number of issues leading up to the Olympics as to whether or not, for instance, North Korea can refrain from further testing that would cause more provocations, whether the U.S. can refrain from imposing more measures, such as more sanctions, or more measures like relisting North Korea as a state sponsor of terrorism that would antagonize the situation. You also, you have the question of these military-to-military talks, and I think a large topic will be what happens to the military exercises. Yes, they have been delayed and postponed until after the Olympics, but they have not been canceled. So, will North Korea ask South Korea, for instance, to cancel that round of exercises? And is that something that South Korea is really willing to consider? And if it is, will it actually have the support of the United States, which I highly doubt in that process? So then what happens? And so, like I said, I think there's a lot of things that could go wrong over the next few weeks, even though, this is a great day today. But in the details, there's still many issues that involve a much deeper conversation and involve, greater implications, not only for inter-Korean relations, but for the whole situation, especially dealing with North Korea's nuclear weapons program.
Devils are in the details, as we know. Professor Lee, though, what about those questions posed by Ms. Tao? Of course, those are very well-assessed questions. And this is the realities all sides have to face. They probably have to make up their mind as to what they really want to do. So this is really a starting point of new testing ground for everybody's goal and ego. Professor Lee.
Well, since I'm so giddy and happy and elated and wildly imaginative today, may I just say, looking into the future, February 16th is Kim Jong-il's birthday. It is the second most important national holiday in North Korea, next to April 15th, the founder's birthday. And this year, February 16th, just happens to be Lunar New Year's Day. And in the past, we know North Korea has conducted a nuclear test on the eve of the founder's birthday as well as Kim Jong-il's birthday, for example, in 2013. If North Korea did something naughty like that, right in the middle of the Olympic Games, what will happen? With athletes and visitors from almost 100 nations all gathered in South Korea, will the Trump administration withdraw American athletes, resort to a military response? I don't think so. So in effect, just by sending people, North Koreans, into the South, Kim Jong-un has basically won, a powerful deterrence against the next provocation. So this is very crafty. It's very, very clever of North Korea to do this.
Well, we're happy and gay for today, but we are also very cautious about the future. Mr. Rong, here comes China's role. I mean, China's role is always there, trying to bring everybody together, trying to come up with a plan, trying to come up with a consensus, and trying to send, representatives of different countries, trying to talk out. Maybe there's some common ground we can work on together. Trying to talk about the double suspension. Of course, that is for a much longer term rather than just, 1 month's time for all sides. Are we going to see further explanation and development of this so-called double suspension strategy coming from China for all sides to calm down and possibly focus on the next step and the common ground?
Oh yeah, this is a great question. I think the idea to have so-called suspension for suspension first came from the North Korean side. And the Chinese, of course, took over and then make it as a kind of initiative that would help the parties concerned to reduce the tension.
We explain to our viewers double suspension or suspension for suspension means, the DPRK suspend their development of nuclear weapons, and the United States and South Korea suspend their actions that would so-called provoke the DPRK, including the joint military exercise. Okay, go ahead, Mr. Rong.
So far, we are literally, despite the fact that neither side are talking about that term, we are having actually the de facto suspension for suspension. So we are only so far. And the Chinese side is very warmly welcomed, if you follow the foreign ministry's spokesperson's remarks. And they also support that, and it's a call upon all the parties, international community, to help them, to help maintain that momentum and make sure that the issues that are being there would be hopefully in the sense that prepare the ground for the continuation of this momentum. And I think the previous speaker talking about that there are a lot of things could go wrong. I would argue that there are quite something that if we can get it right, it can go right.
Yeah.
So this is just the beginning. Let us be hopeful, of course, with caution. But if we hope for best, I think we are definitely not going to have the worst.
Okay, half empty, half full. We all understand that. So let's talk about, before we come to the end of the program, very briefly from every one of you, what are some of the things that could happen positively and that would maybe benefit all the important players of this issue? Let's go with you, Ms. Tang. Usually the lady go first with the most challenging question, right? So Ms. Tang, go ahead. What could be done?
We are hopeful that this will turn out to be an opening and a chance to expand on inter-Korean relations and improve inter-Korean relations, which have been at its worst point in years after the Park Geun-hye administration. We know that Moon Jae-in, for instance, this is the policy platform that he was, putting forward in his campaign as well. So it gives him an opportunity to try and exercise that platform. And if things do go well, it could potentially lead to an opening for better U.S. DPRK relations as well.
Right.
Granted, again, of course, if North Korea can behave itself in that process, and if there's enough incentive to prevent North Korea from continuing to test and continuing to engage in provocative behavior.
All right, as long as there is...
My concern...
Go ahead, very briefly.
I do have a concern, though, is that, one of the inter-Korean economic agendas will be very difficult to come to agreement on without consensus from, for instance, the United Nations Security Council because of sanctions that would restrict Kaesong Industrial Complex in Mount Kumgang. So
that's right.
Like I said, there's a lot of reason to be cautious, but there is reason to be hopeful as well.
All right. The other two gentlemen, we only have 40 seconds left, so 20 seconds for each of you, just to be fair. Mr. Rong, you want to go first? 20 seconds.
Oh, only I want to argue that instead of looking at the positive side, if we want to have a positive result, let's see what would be the negative or possible sort of obstacles there. So I would argue that let's try to identify the possible barriers that would prevent the positive outcome we're looking for.
And work on them. That's the most important thing. And Professor Lee, final words, 20 seconds.
In the short term, you can see the single-shot reunion of families separated between the two sides going back to the Korean War. And this is a heart-wrenching, emotional affair, very meaningful to the people. A 90-year-old mother who has not seen her 70-year-old son in 6 decades. It's a very, very meaningful, high drama. But now South Korea, I hope, will muster up the courage to demand, to call on North Korea to allow these people to continue to maintain contact, exchange of letters, phone calls.
I can see on this topic, everybody wants to continue our discussion. We'll have further opportunities, ladies and gentlemen, in the future. Thank you so much for joining us on this very significant, at least so far. Thank you. We want to express our appreciation, Rong Ying, Sung-Yoon Lee, last but certainly not least, Jenny Tang. Thank you so much. And that is all the time we have for today. If you'd like to see more, try to find us, World Insight CGTN, into your search engine, or check out our YouTube channel. Also follow us on Twitter, Facebook, and Sina Weibo. From me, Tian Wei, everyone in the World Insight team, thanks for watching. See you next time.